This is what happens when you hire uneducated people. She can barely understand English." Kendrick Barnes's voice cut through the elegant restaurant like a knife. The 35-year-old tech executive stood at his table, face red with manufactured outrage, pointing at Aaliyah Washington like she was beneath him. The 23-year-old black waitress stood perfectly still, her professional smile wavering as tears threatened to spill. But she didn't break. She held her composure with a dignity that everyone watching recognized but no one defended. The manager rushed over, trying to calm the situation. Other diners shifted uncomfortably in their seats, looking away, pretending they hadn't heard, and at a nearby table, an elderly Japanese couple watched with concern, understanding humiliation in any language. Before we continue, comment below where you're watching from. Now let's see what led to this moment. Aaliyah Washington was 23 years old and exhausted in a way that went bone deep. She worked as a waitress at Bella Notte, an upscale Italian restaurant where meals cost more than her weekly grocery budget. But this wasn't her only job. She also worked mornings at a coffee shop and weekends tutoring international students. 3 jobs, 70-hour weeks, all to support herself and her 14-year-old brother Marcus. 5 years ago, their parents died in a car accident. Aaliyah was 18, just starting college. She became Marcus's legal guardian overnight, putting her dreams on hold to make sure he had a home, food, stability. But she didn't give up on her education. She was now a senior linguistics major at the university, on full academic scholarship, maintaining a perfect GPA while working those 3 jobs. She was fluent in 7 languages: English, French, Italian, Spanish, Japanese, Mandarin, and Arabic. Her dream was to become a UN translator, to use language to bridge divides between people and nations. But tonight, she was just a waitress. And to Kendrick Barnes, that meant she was uneducated, unintelligent, less than. Kendrick was 35, a tech executive who'd been born into family money and then made more of his own. Success had made him arrogant. Wealth had made him cruel. He believed that education equaled worth, that a person's job determined their value. Tonight, he was here with important clients, trying to impress them with expensive wine and louder opinions. He treated service workers like they were invisible, or worse, like they were inconvenient obstacles to his perfect evening. At a table near the window, Hiroshi and Emiko Tanaka sat together, their hands occasionally finding each other across the table. They were in their 70s, visiting from Tokyo, to celebrate their 50th wedding anniversary. They'd wanted to experience an authentic American dinner, but the language barrier was making everything difficult. They were struggling to communicate their dietary restrictions to their server, who didn't understand and kept bringing the wrong items. The Tanakas were too polite to make a scene, but their frustration was evident to anyone paying attention. Aaliyah had been assigned to Kendrick's table. She approached with her professional smile, notepad ready. Kendrick ordered in rapid-fire sentences, never looking at her, talking to his clients while rattling off his food choices like she was a recording device. Aaliyah listened carefully and repeated the entire order back to him, clearly and precisely, to confirm. He waved her away dismissively, without acknowledging her. When the food arrived exactly as he'd ordered, Kendrick looked down at his plate with exaggerated disappointment. "This isn't what I ordered," he said loudly. Aaliyah felt her stomach drop. "Sir, this is the filet mignon, medium rare, with the truffle butter you requested." Kendrick's face flushed. "Are you even listening? Do you understand English?" Aaliyah remained calm, though her hands trembled slightly. "Sir, I confirmed your order twice. This is exactly what you asked for." But Kendrick was embarrassed now, caught not paying attention in front of his clients. And rather than admit his mistake, he doubled down. He got louder, more aggressive. He called the manager over. Robert, the manager, appeared quickly, his expression worried. He knew Aaliyah was one of his best employees, meticulous, professional, never made mistakes. But he also knew Kendrick was a regular customer who spent thousands of dollars here monthly. Robert was trapped between defending his employee and keeping his customer happy. "This is unacceptable," Kendrick announced to the entire section. "This girl clearly doesn't understand basic instructions. I ordered the salmon, not this." Aaliyah's throat tightened. She knew he was lying. She'd confirmed his order twice. But his word, as a wealthy man in an expensive suit, would carry more weight than hers. Then Kendrick said the words that cut deepest. "This is what happens when you hire uneducated people." His voice rang out across the dining room. "She can barely understand English. Why is she even working here?" Aaliyah's eyes filled with tears, but she refused to let them fall. She stood there, absorbing his cruelty, her dignity intact, even as he tried to strip it away. Other diners watched. Some looked uncomfortable. Some whispered to their companions. But not one person spoke up. Not one person defended her. The silence was its own kind of violence. At their table by the window, the Tanakas were having their own struggle. Their server had just brought them a dish with shellfish, despite their attempts to explain Emiko's severe allergy. They were gesturing, trying to communicate, their frustration mounting. But their server didn't understand Japanese, and their English was limited. They were stuck, embarrassed, and increasingly distressed. Aaliyah heard their struggle through Kendrick's continued berating. She glanced over and recognized immediately what was happening: a language barrier, a problem she could solve in seconds. But Kendrick was still going, and Robert was still trying to placate him, and she was still standing there being called uneducated by a man who knew nothing about her. Then Aaliyah made a decision. She would show them. Not with words of defense, not with arguments or explanations, but with action, with the truth of who she really was. If this story is making you think, subscribe to Love is Kindness for more stories about dignity, hidden strength, and proving that worth isn't determined by your job title. Now let's see what Aaliyah does next. Robert, the manager, opened his mouth, about to ask Aaliyah to step away from Kendrick's table, to take a break, to let him handle it. It was the easier path, the path that would keep the wealthy customer happy. But before he could speak, Aaliyah heard the Tanaka's frustrated voices, saw their server shaking her head helplessly, and made a choice: not defense, action. Dignity through demonstration, not explanation. She walked directly to the Tanaka's table, and in perfect, fluent Japanese, she said, "Excuse me, I couldn't help but notice you're having difficulty. May I help you?" The change in Hiroshi and Emiko's faces was instantaneous. Relief flooded their expressions, followed by pure surprise. They began speaking rapidly in Japanese, explaining about Emiko's shellfish allergy, their dietary preferences, what they'd been trying to communicate for 20 minutes. Aaliyah listened intently, nodding, smiling, taking notes on her pad, responding in their language with ease and warmth. The entire restaurant was watching now. Conversations stopped mid-sentence, forks paused halfway to mouths, and at his table, Kendrick Barnes sat frozen, his face cycling through confusion, then dawning realization, then something that looked like horror. Aaliyah finished helping the Tanakas, their grateful smiles lighting up their faces. Then a voice called out from across the room in French, "Mademoiselle, could you help us as well?" A French couple was waving her over, struggling with the menu. Without missing a beat, Aaliyah walked to their table and responded in flawless French, her accent perfect, her manner gracious. She explained the menu items, made recommendations, answered their questions like she'd been born in Paris. An Italian family at another table had been watching. The father waved her over, speaking in rapid Italian. Aaliyah switched languages seamlessly, laughing at something he said, discussing the authentic preparation of the osso buco, making them feel heard and understood. Then a Spanish-speaking couple asked a question about wine pairings. She answered in Spanish without hesitation, her vocabulary sophisticated, her grammar impeccable. The restaurant was buzzing now, alive with astonishment. People were whispering, pointing, pulling out their phones. Robert stood near the kitchen door, his face glowing with pride. He'd always known Aaliyah was brilliant. He'd seen her study textbooks during breaks, heard her practice pronunciation, But he'd never had a chance to show her off, and now she was showing herself. Kendrick's clients were leaning toward each other, whispering urgently. One of them, a woman in a sharp business suit, had pulled out her phone and was recording. Kendrick sat there, his face now a deep red, completely speechless. The man who'd had so much to say minutes ago couldn't find a single word. Aaliyah returned to stand near Kendrick's table. Robert cleared his throat, his voice carrying across the quiet restaurant. "Aaliyah, I think Mr. Barnes owes you an apology," Kendrick stammered, his mouth opening and closing, humiliation written across every feature. Aaliyah looked at him, and her voice was calm, measured, devastatingly composed. "Sir, you're right about one thing. I do understand English perfectly." She paused, letting that sink in. "I also understand French, Italian, Spanish, Japanese, Mandarin, and Arabic. I'm a senior linguistics major at the university on full academic scholarship. I graduate in 3 months with highest honors." The restaurant was dead silent. Every eye was on her. "I work here because I'm putting myself and my younger brother through school after our parents died 5 years ago. I work 3 jobs, 70 hours a week, to make sure he has a home and a future." Her voice never wavered, never rose. "Being a waitress doesn't make someone uneducated, Mr. Barnes. It makes them someone willing to work hard for what they believe in." Kendrick's clients were staring at him now, and their expressions had shifted from impressed to disgusted. The woman who'd been recording set her phone down deliberately. "Kendrick," she said coldly, "I think we need to discuss our partnership. I don't work with people who treat others like this." Her colleague nodded in agreement. "Neither do I." The woman's phone was already uploading the video. Within minutes, it was shared to her social media, then picked up by others in the restaurant. Comments started flooding in. The manager's phone began ringing, then the restaurant's phone. Emails pinged. By the time Aaliyah walked back to the kitchen, her face still composed but her hands finally shaking, she was already trending on 3 platforms. Multilingual waitress shuts down arrogant customer. The video was being shared thousands of times, each share adding another witness to Kendrick's cruelty and Aaliyah's grace. Kendrick's clients stood up from the table, their decision made. The woman spoke first, her voice cold and final. "Our firm won't be moving forward with this partnership." Her colleague nodded. "Neither will mine." They walked out without looking back, leaving Kendrick sitting alone at a table set for 4. The video spread like wildfire. By morning, it had millions of views. Kendrick's company saw it, his board saw it, clients saw it. By noon, he was called into an emergency meeting. The board gave him a choice: issue a public apology and resign, or be terminated with cause. Either way, his career at the company was over. The thing he'd valued most, his status, his reputation, his carefully crafted image, was destroyed by his own cruelty captured on camera for the world to see. But while Kendrick's world was crumbling, Aaliyah's was about to change in ways she never imagined. As the restaurant began to empty that night, Hiroshi Tanaka approached her, Emiko at his side. Through a mixture of English and Japanese, with Aaliyah translating, he introduced himself properly. "I am Hiroshi Tanaka, retired CEO of Tanaka Translation Services. My wife, Emiko, was head of cultural affairs." Aaliyah's eyes widened. She knew the company, one of the most respected translation firms in the world, Hiroshi continued, speaking slowly so she could process. "We've been looking for someone to run our new American branch office. We need someone brilliant with languages, yes, but more importantly, someone with integrity and grace." He paused. "Would you be interested?" "After your graduation, of course." Aaliyah felt tears streaming down her face before she could stop them. The salary he mentioned was triple what she made working 3 jobs combined. I don't understand. Why me? You just met me." Emiko spoke in Japanese, and Aaliyah translated her own words through her tears. "Because you have what cannot be taught. Languages can be learned from books. But grace, dignity, kindness under pressure, that is rare, that is precious. Hiroshi nodded. You helped us when you were being humiliated. You chose compassion over anger. That's character. That's what we need. Robert, the manager, had been standing nearby, having overheard everything. He pulled Aaliyah aside, his own eyes wet. You've been the best employee I've ever had. Take the job. You deserve this and so much more. He squeezed her hand. But no, you'll always have a place here if you need it. Always. Aaliyah hugged him. This man who'd quietly supported her for 2 years, who'd let her study during slow periods, who'd defended her schedule when she needed time for exams. Thank you, she whispered, for seeing me. 3 months later, Aaliyah walked across the stage at her university graduation. Her brother Marcus was in the front row, 14 years old and wearing their father's old tie, his face glowing with pride. And in the third row, having flown all the way from Tokyo, sat Hiroshi and Emiko Tanaka, beaming. Aaliyah had been chosen as valedictorian. Her speech brought the auditorium to tears. Never let anyone's opinion of you become your reality, she told her fellow graduates. 3 months ago, I was called uneducated while working 70 hours a week to educate myself. But that moment of cruelty led me here, to all of you, and to a dream job I didn't even know existed. Our worth isn't determined by how others see us. It's determined by how we see ourselves and how we treat others. 1 month after graduation, Aaliyah walked into her new office at Tanaka Translation Services, American headquarters. Her name was on the door, Director Aaliyah Washington. The office was beautiful, overlooking the city. That afternoon, Marcus came by after school, spreading his homework across her desk while she worked. She was using all 7 of her languages every single day, connecting people, bridging cultures, making a real difference. She was exactly where she was meant to be. As for Kendrick Barnes, his fall was complete. His company let him go when clients threatened to pull their contracts. His public apology was too late and too clearly insincere to save him. He eventually found work in middle management at a smaller firm, his arrogance replaced with something closer to humility. And occasionally, he'd see Aaliyah's name in business news. Her success, a constant reminder of the moment his cruelty backfired spectacularly. 6 months later, Aaliyah returned to Bellinate, not as an employee but as a guest. She brought Marcus and the Tanakas, who were visiting again. The staff was thrilled to see her, crowding around to congratulate her on her success. A young Latina waitress, maybe 20, took their order. Aaliyah spoke to her in Spanish, gentle and encouraging. "What are you studying?" The girl lit up. "Nursing. I'm working my way through school." Aaliyah smiled and squeezed her hand. Never let anyone make you feel small because of your job. You're not just serving tables. You're building your future, and that's something to be proud of. The young woman's eyes filled with tears of gratitude. 1 year later, Aaliyah stood in the lobby of the United Nations headquarters in New York, there for a work conference. She watched a young interpreter translating for a delegate, remembering when that had been her dream. Maybe someday, she thought. But for now, she was exactly where she needed to be. Supporting Marcus, honoring her parents' memory, proving that dignity isn't determined by occupation, and that grace under pressure is the truest measure of character. That man thought he was better than me because of what I did for work, Aaliyah reflected. But he taught me something valuable. People who need to belittle others are usually trying to elevate themselves. Real education isn't just about degrees. It's about empathy, respect, and understanding that everyone's struggle deserves dignity. He mocked her as uneducated, trying to humiliate her in front of everyone. But Aaliyah Washington didn't just prove him wrong. She showed the world that true intelligence includes kindness, that fluency in languages means nothing without fluency in human decency, and that sometimes the people we underestimate are the ones who end up rising higher than we ever could. Education isn't just what you know. It's how you treat people when you think no one important is watching. What did you think of Aaliyah's story? Rate it from 0 to 10 inches the comments below. And if this story reminded you that everyone deserves respect regardless of their job, subscribe to Love is Kindness for more stories about dignity, grace, and unexpected triumph. Thank you for watching, and remember, never judge someone by where they work. Judge them by how they treat others.